Good afternoon, Senate institutions. It's Tuesday, March 26th. Starting, well, we're on time today. A few minutes late. As customary, at start of the week, they seem to come faster and faster and faster. Seems like we just did this the other day. But I'd like to introduce the committees, starting over here.
I am still Wendy Harrison, Senate, the Senator, I keep getting caught up on that. Representing the Wyndham District in the Senate.
Irene Rower, Senator for Chittenden Northwich and Fairfax.
Brian Collmore, the Rutland District.
Linda Lehman, Committee Assistant.
Senator Russ Ingles, Essex District. So welcome, everybody. Glad to have everybody here. It's a good time to have you. So we're gonna really be diving into the capital bill, I think, pretty quick. We're hearing rumors that we're getting close to doing that. We have been, in the last couple years, we've been having conversations throughout this building about the 3-acre impervious surface. How it affects the fairgrounds, and we have, to be fair, I've had a lot of great conversations with Mr. Carpenter over here, and just trying to figure out how we can help the fairgrounds. We understand the battles that you folks face, as far as that it could even possibly put you out of business. In some of our conversations, we found out that there might be a little bit of a workaround on some of this. And so we're just kind of exploring. There might be some monies available, some that might be cheaper than what the alternative's been. So I think we have a long ways to go, but today starts a really good discussion. And I think that we might want to, who would like to start off? Mr. Monks, would you like to start off the conversation?
Sure, happy to.
Okay, so I might come on up to the chair, and so I think with a lot of the monies that we have during through the water infrastructure financing program through the Department of Environmental Conservation, and we might have some monies available that could be some monies along with some match money. So I'm gonna just be quiet, and because I've got in deeper than what I really know right now, and I'm gonna have Mr. Monk start out the conversation.
Well, great. Good afternoon. Patrick Monks, I'm the Water Infrastructure Finance Program Manager. We're part of the Water Investment Division at DPC. My program is primarily involved with State Revolving Loan Fund. The department also has recently instituted a permit obtainment assistance program using ARPA dollars. So starting with the ARPA dollar program, pretty much all 3-acre sites, except for state-owned, federally owned, and large businesses, are eligible for upwards of $50,000 to assist them in obtaining a permit. It's broken down. A project can get up to $20,000 towards permit review costs, and then upwards of $30,000 for their engineering costs associated with that. Essentially, the way that program works is applicants, when they've submitted their stormwater permit application for coverage under the 3-acre general permit, they're eligible to apply for a reimbursement of those costs. Contact for that program is Madeline Russell. Anyone's got any follow-up questions, feel free to send them my way as well, and I can help point you in the right direction.
Is it okay, just if you could just start by explaining the 3-acre program?
I know I was driving in, I was like, all right, I'm here to talk about funding,
Because
and then I was like, maybe I need to
it's
get
an
background on
interest-
3-acre,
yeah.
but then you jumped right into it, and I was like,
Yeah.
all right, you guys have heard enough.
No, we
Sure.
have, but there are people watching.
Sure. All right, to back up. I've been in my current role since 2021 for 20 years. Before that, I was in stormwater programs. I was involved in the development of the stormwater rule and adoption of that, called a 3-acre general permit. Basically, going back to, I think, around 2016, the legislature passed Act 64, also known as the Clean Water Act, Vermont Clean Water Act. And that was primarily focused on addressing the impairment of Lake Champlain, but also Lake Winnebago. Lake Champlain has a cleanup plan called the TMDL that was adopted actually by US EPA. As part of that, the the agency, these developments called a, implementation plan. You know, essentially EPA set a target, has clean up the lakes, how much phosphorus needs to come down. They say, state, what are you gonna do to get there? So agriculture and stuff, we do stuff. One of the programs we identified in that implementation plan, what we call the 3-acre permit, whereby we would use existing authorities to to require existing larger projects with 3 or more acres of, impervious surface, roads, rooftops, parking lots, all those projects that either never had a permit or were permitted a long time ago, before 2002. Under our implementation plan, said, all right, all those projects would be required to improve their stormwater treatment. Legislature under Act 64 said, yes, that's exactly what it shall do. It passed law and required all those sites to obtain permit coverage by no later than, I think it was last year. Essentially, all those projects are now required to have permit coverage. Once a 3-acre site has obtained a permit, they generally have 5 years to construct their stormwater system. There are about roughly 700-ish 3-acre sites, you know, in Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog basins. Good chunk, you know, it's a mix: residential, commercial, industrial. It's a lot of residential. So that's.
Thank you, that's helpful. Yeah.
Any other questions? Feel free.
Well, I just want to get the folks on the screen. So, we have on the screen Jackie Folsom, Tim Shea, Cindy K. Hart, and Robert Condon. Anything, any questions from you folks up there as far as, have you divulged any new revelations of a funding source of anything like that? Because we're gonna talk more about it, but any questions, from you folks on the screen? All good? Everybody
think
all good?
Senator,
Okay.
thank you very much. Jackie Folsom, for the record, I'm the lobbyist and the secretary for the Vermont Bears and Field Days Association. I think these folks have been aware of that $50,000 obtaining permit program, because they've been getting the emails from it. And I think all of them, if they have not already, will be looking for that assistance. The challenge is not that, it's the next step, which is what we're talking about. And that is it's $50,000 to help for the permitting. But all of these folks are looking at $500,000 worth
Exactly.
of projects, that's what we're looking for the money for.
So, Ms. Monks,
Just a
any money's
clarification.
available after the permitting process through these clean water funds?
Mhm.
Yes, and so just one final note on the ARPA program, because those are ARPA funds, your projects need to apply by the end of October of this year. Our primary work is the implementation of the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. Program's been around for 2 or more decades. Each year we receive a grant from EPA. Those funds, combined with prior year loans, repayment funds, are made available to projects. Clean water infrastructure projects. We also have a drinking water and revolving loan fund, but today's discussion is focused on clean water. We issue loans for planning, design, and construction. Some of those loans are partially or fully forgiven. A loan for $100,000 might be what we call subsidy, might have 100% subsidy, so the repayment is 0. An important part of the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund is that we prioritize assistance for municipalities. That's a statutory requirement there. We can issue loans for private entities, but it's much more limited. So it's in a property owner's interest to partner with the municipality. That the municipality, when we say sponsor the loan, and the municipality would actually be the applicant on behalf of the private landowner. Each year we issue what we call our intended use plan, which spells out the different programs that would have what project categories are potentially eligible for loan forgiveness. Under our current plan, for planning and for design and permitting 3-acre sites. We offer, the program offers up to 100% loan forgiveness for up to $150,000 for privately owned 3-acre sites that are working with the sponsoring municipality. Projects coming in for, we call that a planning loan. Projects coming in for planning loan can come in at any time. Projects that are seeking construction funding need to apply each year to be on our priority list. Those projects are ranked based on the points that give the project scores. Depending on the year, our funding is competitive. We've got a couple big projects likely to come in this year, so we'll have what we call a funding run. We rank all the projects. At some point, we run out of money, and so everybody above that funding line is invited to apply for funding. If not all those projects go forward, we then go down, below that funding line over time and invite additional projects to come and apply. And again, going back to the municipal sponsorship, a private entity that partners with a 3-acre site that partners with the municipality will score more points in the priority list and also be potentially eligible for forgiveness. So it's a big piece. Private entities can come in by themselves. They won't qualify for loan forgiveness, but our loan rates are better than the banks. As a first step, any project that is interested in coming in, they're encouraged to reach out to our engineers. In the water infrastructure finance program, on the other half of our program is the design and construction engineers. They're the ones who handle project eligibility. So generally speaking, stormwater is eligible for private entities, but we would want to firm up the project. Currently, for projects that qualify under our current intended use plan, construction projects, we offer up to 50% loan forgiveness, up to $750,000 per project. Again, the project would have to rank high enough to be able to apply for funding, and at some point we run out of subsidy as well. That particular form of loan forgiveness is available for projects that meet our affordability criteria. In a nutshell, that's a project where their median household income is below the statewide average, and where their user costs, the cost that they're paying related to their clean water infrastructure, is about 2% of the users MHI. Then you look at, generally a clean water project often involves wastewater, so you look at who are all the ratepayers involved and look at their MHI and whether the rates will be more than 2%. If so, then that applicants need to meet our affordability criteria and be eligible for that form of loan forgiveness. We do try to keep these programs similar year to year, but we do need to adapt to the needs of our communities and also the level of funding that we receive from UVA that varies and has been impacted by congressional directed spending, which cuts that grant down, and that in turn affects how much loan forgiveness we can offer in a given year.
We got a question from Jackie. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'm hearing you say is that you have things available for residential. These fairs are not residential. There's no way they would qualify for residential. What I also thought I heard you say was if their municipality applied on their behalf, that might work, but I'm getting a little confused with whether you're talking only about residential. These fairs wouldn't qualify under that. These are not single family dwellings. These are businesses. I think they're all nonprofits that would, and thank you very much for the information on the loans, but I don't think that's going to work either. I mean, even if you can forgive up to 150,000, not a projects is less than 500,000. So could you clarify a little bit more on what you just said? If what you've just commented on is only for residential, that's not going to help these folks at all. Thank you.
Sure. No, sorry if I wasn't clear. The private entities are eligible to apply, but the SRF program is primarily geared towards municipalities. And private entities aren't limited to residential. Earlier I referenced the fact that a good chunk of the 3 acre sites are residential, and that wasn't really related to whether or not there's eligibility on the state revolving loan fund program, so. Yes, private entities can come in for clean water state revolving loan funds. The chances of receiving funds are greater if that entity partners with the municipality. Municipality is the loan recipient. The $150,000 is the max for loan forgiveness for a planning loan currently. And $750,000 is the maximum loan forgiveness for construction projects currently.
And then if it wasn't, if there was no forgiveness part of it, as you said, your rates even for a full project are cheaper than most. Is that kind of what I heard you say as
Yeah,
well?
Yes, currently it's 2% or municipal borrower.
So I want to kind of spell it out for these folks that are on the screen, because again, I think that, I just want to be very clear that I think that we probably have found something that could work in a way. As far as what you're saying is, we could get this to work for the fairs. Maybe everybody's different. There's all different amounts of monies on each project, but there could be some availability of dollars, especially if they matched up with their municipality. They would have a greater chance of getting accepted. But this could work for these fairs that we have on the screen.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
So just again, for the benefit of the 3 fairs that are represented and Jackie, I was very interested in finding a way to exempt the fairs from the 3 acre rule. I'll be right up front about that. I thought that was the best way to handle it, and I understand that other people would be waiting in line if that happened to say, hey, how about us? How about us? How about us? And that's fair, that's fine. But there may be a process to kind of take care of that. But my initial thing was, we need to exempt them. We need to make sure that they continue to stay in operation. As Jackie said, they're all nonprofits, and I think they deserve a little bit more special attention, because the impact fees that they're facing to mitigate the stormwater permit, in some cases, I know Robert's gonna weigh in probably, we're talking $700, $800, $1,000, $1 million in some places. I'm sure the Champlain Valley Fair, and Tim can talk about that, is even more because there's more acreage there. So that was where I was coming from, was an exemption, just pure and simple. The 12 or 14 fairs we have don't have to worry about the 3 acre rule anymore. It's done. There are other members of the committee who justifiably would rather have funding available for them to do the mitigation, to figure a way to get this done. And that's okay too. So when we heard from Eric Blatt, I think he was in, I don't know, last Wednesday, I'm gonna guess. And all of a sudden, while we're beginning to talk about this, it came up and the light went on, and I said, oh, wait a minute, are you saying, and I used the example, that a fair would be able to have access to forgivable, or in my case, a grant, to get some of this stuff done so they can begin to address what we need to do with the 3 acre rule? And he said, yes. So that's where, and forgive us if we sort of raise the hopes out there that maybe this would happen a little bit more easily than maybe it could, or to a greater extent that maybe it could. But that's where I was coming from. First of all, to exempt them, if we can't do that, let's find a way to help them out with money that will allow a study, because there has to be an engineering study first to figure out what's the best way for Fair A to come to this, and then for the construction cost to get it done. So that's where I was.
Right, and that's the same way. I mean, it's, I think Brian, Senator Collmore said it perfectly. That yes, we'd rather see an exemption, but we were hoping that maybe we were gonna be able to bring some more information to the fairs that they weren't already, that they hadn't gotten before. Some availabilities of some money, so the exemption just doesn't seem to be getting the head of steam that I had hoped that it would. But I'm hoping that we're bringing some new information. As you said, Jackie, you were aware of the planning study monies, but the fact that there might be some dollars out there at a lower interest or forgivable loans, is that any new information to you guys at all, Mr. Congdon?
Thank you, Senator. I was aware that there was going to be some funding available. However, I guess where my question goes immediately is the situation with those of us that may not feasibly be able to comply, because my engineer has flat out told me that our property is not conducive to a wastewater project, which we need, and that's why he told me you need to begin preparing to pay the fees, because the reality is that our real estate does not offer itself easily to designing a project. He said that the designs of the projects would, first off, heavily impact our business, and actually some of our major revenue areas on the grounds, because those are about the only place that we have the possibility that could be built into stormwater treatment facility. And even if we're able to build in those places, impacting our revenue, it's not going to treat the volume of water that's going to need to be treated based on the initial information about how many acres are going to need to be able to be treated. So I guess my question is, I'm in a bit of a unique situation. I think Tim and Addison have the ability, based on my understanding, they have the real estate, at least, that I don't have that availability. And the other flip side of that as well is, my understanding is, much like a septic system, the land needs to perk, and that's the other piece of it that I've been told, that not to expect our property to perk. So that's a struggle that we're facing in Rutland, which I know that the grants and the loans will not cover impact fees, because actually our impact fees are what goes into those programs to fund other projects through loans to other organizations. So if there's any answer to that, we are in a unique situation in Rutland for sure.
Mr. Monk, you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I think you hit on an important point. The stormwater rule, the 3-acre general permit does identify, or does provide, acknowledges that not every site will be able to fully meet standards. And in those cases, those projects, it's a feasibility analysis. You can't just say, oh, I don't want to do it, or it's going to cost too much. You have to do it unless you can, based on what the engineers conclude, and stormwater program, reviews that and concurs. In those cases, the project pays impact fees. I'm blanking, unfortunately, it's been a couple of years since I was immersed in that program, but those impact fees are actually less than what it costs generally to build a stormwater system. They're a lot. I don't say that to minimize what the impact of the property owners, but those impact fees generally are less, but they're not eligible for either the funding programs I've described. Because under the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, we're funding clean water projects that are going in on the ground, improving water quality. The impact fee is a little far removed there.
How long do they have to pay the impact fees?
They're due at the time that project applies for the permit.
So, and they can't do it over 10 years?
Not that I'm aware of, unless that's changed.
Right now, it would be something to look at.
Jackie, you get your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I just wanted to add on to Robert's testimony, and I think that they've been told their impact fees are going to be $870,000. So for you to say that it's less than building a plant, I don't think so. And if there's no way to mitigate, to find help for that, that is going to put them out of business, especially if it's all due at one chunk. So that's the concern with Rutland, albeit the other two fairs, and the other fairs that I'm looking at that are still not on the list, they will be made aware of the grants that are available, but we don't know if any of the other fairs are going to be in Rutland's situation where they have to pay a mitigation fee, and they are still being asked to try to put in some type of system on top of that. So it isn't always true that those mitigation fees are less than the cost of the total system.
Cindy O'Brien, or Cindy or Tim, I mean, any comments on any of this? Is any of this helpful to you at all?
Well, I don't know how our fairground could tag team with a municipality. We're just out in the middle of kind of nowhere. And then one of my big questions is, we applied for our permit, we have our permit, they've designed our system. And then we were told that if we want to move forward with anything, we have to apply for another permit, which that is gonna end up, I mean, you can't move forward because of the time constraints and stuff. So, I really would love to figure out how to get around that, because we do have, actually, we need to fix some of the ground that the mud made that we can't use this year. And we were told that in order to do that, we need to apply for a permit before we put gravel down in those spots. And if we have to do that every time we upgrade something, it's going to be impossible to maintain or grow.
Tim?
Yeah, I'll just add, first of all, I appreciate the committee's work on this. I know you have a lot of weighty issues you're working through in your committee, and we appreciate the time you put towards fairs. Yeah, I mean, it's a loan, I guess it's, to some extent, it's encouraging to hear the loan could be forgiven. We have a good relationship with our municipality here. And, I guess we could chat with them. It's just, even borrowing $750,000, it's just a lot of money. And I think we're the proud owner of 33 acres of impervious surface, and the ballpark number we've heard, and we haven't finished our plan yet, is, $50,000 per acre. That's $1.5 million. We're going through the process. Do we sell land? Because we as our organization, I think I speak for the other two on the call here, you just don't generate that kind of revenue to pay for this. And I'm not certain, so let's say we got the 750 loan from the state, I still got to go borrow $500,000 or so plus from a lender. And I'm not certain they would, how they would be on that, because there's really no method to pay it back. We've made capital improvements over the years where we've borrowed money, and you can make it's a 10-year payback. You go to the bank with that model in place. So I'm just echoing what I said. I appreciate the efforts there, and we'll certainly look in these at these loan programs here. But it just it's a scary number that we're presented with.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just say again, for the record, that I had talked to the 3 congressional folks or their representatives. I wasn't lucky enough to actually talk to the 2 senators or the congresswoman, and asked whether the EPA would be able to do anything, especially with respect to the fairs, to help out in terms of modifying deadline dates or something like that. I did not hear back from any of them, so I assume that was a no. And then I went to Elcar, who came up with the 3-acre rule, I believe. At least here's the way that I understood the thing rolled out. At one point, I think Patrick said 2003 or something back there, 2002 maybe.
16. Well, 2002 was the benchmark of some of our older stormwater standards.
Yeah.
So it was before
16.
and after that date, but Clean Water Act was around 2016.
Yeah. So in 2016, the EPA said, okay, Vermont, here's what you gotta do. You gotta get the TMDL at a certain level, and you gotta figure out a way that you guys wanna do it and get back to us. I mean, I'm putting it in pretty small or simple terms, but that's pretty much what happened. So the legislature in Vermont figured out, okay, well, here's the way we're gonna do it. We're gonna do this 3-acre rule, and here are all the things that have to be done, and we rolled it out. But it was up to us to figure out the way that we wanted to comply with what the EPA said we had to do. And that's what we came up with. So in my view, we can alter that, we can change it, we can modify it, amend it, or whatever verb you want to use. And I don't know whether we could push the date out, because I remember seeing Patrick in a meeting probably in 2015 in Rutland. And one of the questions I asked, you probably don't remember, was whether there were enough engineers in the state to be able to do the necessary studies. And I was told, no, there aren't. So to me, immediately that puts a deadline date in jeopardy. If you don't have enough people to do the study, let alone the construction, how could you ever expect that the deadline date would be met in any fashion? So I just would suggest again that we, and I know that, because I've talked to members of Elcott, they're really not interested in kind of reopening this. But I don't know what else to do, because we risk putting 14 fairs out of business if we don't do something. They just don't have the available money to do it. So maybe I could just, if you were us, what would you do? How do we fix this?
I don't know. You know,
So you see that there's a
Oh,
problem.
absolutely, and you know, I think the fairs they're important. They're large parts of our communities. They aren't entirely unlike a lot of other affected property owners, right? You know, we've got mobile home communities, you know, who are subject to this. You name it, and there's all sorts of projects that, yeah, where this will be a challenge. We have some funding. We don't have the funding to cover everybody. You know, and I think that was kind of all known at the time this went forward. This has to be done. You know, but there wasn't some easy alternative of, oh, let's address this other source pollution. You know, I think the implementation plan tries to, you know, it's addressing all sorts of different sources. Logging, farming, roads, municipalities, 3-acre sites. It's just a large and complex problem, so I don't know what could be done in lieu of addressing this category in discharge. The question with that is how do we pay for it? I mean, some answers, but we don't have all the answers.
I should mention too, I don't think all the fairs necessarily are in the same situation, because we're talking about Lake Champlain for the most part here. And there are others that I know, Caledonian and up in the Northeast Kingdom, that won't. Eventually they may, but they can sort of look across the state and say, huh, this might be coming for us too.
Well, it is in that under current statute, which wasn't, you know, part of the Lake Champlain TMD opening up plan or anything. It was, you know, when Pumare passed, it was made statewide that in the other watersheds, the eastern half of the state, and southwest, northeast, the permit deadline is 2028. So at the time it was passed, that was way out.
Yeah, that's it.
But you know,
Like 3.5 years from now.
2024.
Yeah.
That's probably an important conversation to have as we look at, all right, what is the availability of funding? Do we want to bring in another category of projects, especially if those receiving waters meet standards? That we're discharging the Connecticut River meet standards. Do we need to do this? And that doesn't help, you know, projects that are currently affected, but it just only indirectly. Yeah, we got a limited pot.
Tim,
Yeah, this is a great conversation. I mean, we can't be the only group that's having a hard, I mean, what's the farming community? They gotta be hit hard by this too, right? Farms, I mean, they're similar models to us from a resource perspective.
I mean, they are facing different challenges. The Agency of Natural Resources doesn't regulate stormwater from farms. They're statutorily exempt, they're regulated by the Agency of Agriculture. The state is similar under federal stormwater regulations as well. Farms are managed differently. Yeah, farms are facing, you know, a lot of additional requirements, and you know, all I know is there is some funding and technical assistance. I don't know what, you know, how individual farms are faring.
Cindy,
I can answer that because I am a dairy farmer and my farm sits between our fairgrounds and Otter Creek. And we have at least a mile of Otter Creek river frontage for our land. And we've worked hand in hand with NRCS to do all the water quality standards that are there. And part of being a certified small farm, we have to abide by all the water quality rules. So and NRC helps defray the costs for those. And so that's why part of my confusion was that our comparable acreage that sits next to the fairground we have stormwater runoff from the same hill, it crosses the same road, and we have a nice grass waterway, and the water goes down to the land between where it ends and the stream that our fair's water runs into. And so I was very confused, like, we're talking about the same water, the exact same water coming off the exact same hill. And I guess I wish that perhaps they look at, I mean, I know that it takes too many people, but if you looked at these fairgrounds individually and maybe tried to figure out what would work or what they actually need instead of a cookie cutter rule that is supposed to be one size fits all. So that's.
Yeah. Well,
I think Cindy,
go ahead, Jackie.
I think Cindy makes a good point because there are a lot of other pots of money that have been helping farmers. The agricultural community was one of the hardest hit when the TMDL came out because they blamed the farms for the pollution, and they are the ones with all they've received that have really stepped up. And I think she's got a good point about the fact that this is a cookie cutter plan, and it doesn't for everybody. If you think Rutland's in trouble, wait till you get to Tunbridge. I mean, that fair is right in the middle of mountains, and it is never going to perk, and they're never going to be able to put anything in. So you're looking at devastated at that fair too, and they aren't even on the list. So I think the cookie cutter point is true. And the other thing I'd like to say is, since working with this group for the last 20 years, when we've come into the legislature to thank you and tell you what they've been doing with the capital funds, Cindy's made a good point in that every year we've asked the fairs to have a 5-year plan. What are you doing with the capital funds for the next 5 years? So clear how your investment in their fairs is making a difference in what they're doing. And I think you heard about that a little bit this year too. The problem is now that if these fairs, every time they want to build onto that 5-year capital plan, they have to come in for another permit for the water system, that is done. I mean, they're not going to be able to even think about doing a matching capital grants improvement on their grounds if they're scrambling to pay a loan that may or may not be forgiven. And so the state has made tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in investments over the last 20 years in these fairgrounds that are going to be almost worthless if they go out of business. I mean, it's a catch-22. But I like Cindy's point about the fact that this seems to be cookie cutter. And why does it have to be that? I mean, why is everybody, the farms are not cookie cutter because they're all working with somebody different. They're all working with NRCS, which is working, and the Agency of Agriculture and the Clean Water Fund to invest in the changes that they have to make, and they are not cookie cutter. So why are the fairs cookie cutter? I guess that's an interesting point.
Senator Harrison, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a few things. And I'm curious about like what is the cookie cutter-ish thing that the fairs are being subject to. But do you have a long-term financial expectation? Because a lot of what is funded with this are the wastewater treatment facilities of the municipalities, I think, right? And so at some point that those funds will, they'll ebb and flow, right? So if there's going to be an ebb time in the next few years, that could be a good time to focus on things like fairs. Is one just thought I had. And I think allowing a 10-year plus payback, if that is ever necessary for them to, or others, I think that might be something to look at just generally, because this fund isn't going away. This isn't a temporary fund. So having a 10-year payback could be workable, keeps people in business. And the fairs that are not subject to that to this now, for sure, are going to be subject, because that, it is a statewide program,
If they are that large, yeah.
right, well,
Yeah, 3 acres of
Yeah.
impervious, it adds up, you know, quickly with farms and roads.
right, right,
I'm not so sure that the 10-year plan, if you're looking at $1 million, that means you gotta pay back $100,000 each year.
Yeah. yeah.
I just don't see that that's in the cards.
Like third. So quickly, I'm not entirely sure on the cookie cutter, what that refers to exactly. There are, you know, a 3 acre site is required to comply with with the Vermont Stormwater Management Manual. That manual has like about 5 different treatment standards. And that's what a new project meets. A 3 acre site meets just what's called the water quality treatment standard, and it meets about half of that compared to the new one. Within that manual, there are various stormwater practices like constructed wetland filter and extended extension pond, those sorts of approaches. That may be probably is more cookie cutter than what a farm experiences, where someone comes out and look around, what's going on, how do we address this, what's gonna work. But it isn't, every project has to be exactly the same. There are choices in terms of how you meet the required standards. In terms of, you know, the ebb and flow of demands on the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, that is true. It goes up, and it goes down depending on a range of factors. We don't generally know too far out. We do, as part of each year, as mentioned, we develop the intended use plan. As part of that, we develop a priority list of projects that want to see construction funding applied. As part of that, we do ask for a future need. You know, it's not required. Not every, you know, if you don't say you're going to need funding in 2 years, come in 2 years later, that's okay. But it helps to paint a picture. We do have conversations with municipalities as to what their coming needs will be. Say the next couple of years are more like a spike than an ebb.
Okay,
There's some large wastewater treatment projects, projects that municipalities complying with the TMDL also. So we're likely to see a large spike. Exactly when that demand will be realized. So it's up to the municipalities to some degree. Construction loans, the loan term repayment term can't exceed the life of the asset. But that's generally not an issue. So unless we can go out to 30 years on construction loan repayment.
Again, just thinking out loud here, folks.
yeah,
Would there be any appetite, do you imagine, for a reduction in the impact fees for the fairs, or some sort of mitigating? I don't know how you're gonna save on engineering costs. I mean, they are what they are. The engineers are probably not gonna work for free, but to me, there's gotta be a way we can help the fairs that we're not thinking of right now. And I thought, again, when Eric was in last week, I thought we'd found the pot. But apparently, even if we found the pot, there's not enough of the pot to help out too much. So is there any appetite, do you imagine, for putting the fairs in a separate category and mitigating or reducing the impact fees to some extent?
Probably, I'm not the person to answer that.
I know, and I realize
I
put
can
you on the
safely
spot.
say, probably not, because again, the impact fees, and I get it, they can add up, and I agree with the comment that they aren't necessarily always higher than what's required in terms of actually putting in a stormwater system. They often are less than that. But I mean, I think a conversation could be had there. And most projects also aren't, and we talked about fees, just to be clear, there's the fees you pay your engineer, there's the fees permitting that you pay the agency when you apply for a permit. For projects that can't meet the standards, they pay an impact.
Right.
Most projects don't get to that point. The feasibility criteria are strict. It really has to be, it can't be done versus don't want to do it or it costs too much. So there might be some projects there are projects that do meet that bar of saying it's just not feasible, I'm paying impact fees. But most projects, it's going to be they're either meeting the standards or it's a combination. So you could lower the fee, that would obviously reduce the burden for some projects. They're already quite low in terms of the intent there. Act 64 did require that our rule of general permit include impact fees. The idea behind those impact fees, it's like, all right, well, if someone can't do it, they pay a fee. And so then that the agency would have those funds to incentivize somebody to go above and beyond.
Yeah.
And so if we set those impact fees so low, then it's never gonna be in someone's interest to go above and beyond, because what we can pay them to do that won't cover their costs. And that's currently the case with where we've established impact fees today, in my opinion.
So another idea possibly is, so impact fees are often to compensate the community for what you're doing, you know, like, impact fees for schools and things like that. But could you, I'm thinking about a standard fee that's kind of in lieu of treating your own stormwater, that's almost like what you pay a utility if, in the case of other wastewater, that would just go on forever. But if it were an annual amount that wasn't supposed to compensate for a specific structure or structures, it might be a lot lower. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, as opposed to a one-time fee.
Yeah,
Yes. There could be a timing issue there that, okay, if you've laid out that money over time, what's being done with it? So we have, there's implementation deadlines associated with the TMPL. There's also the question, we have to have those projects. If someone's paying an
I have to
fee
mitigate.
in lieu of actually doing
Yeah.
something on their site, well, then somebody else is gonna have to be coming in and filling in that.
Right, well, if you had a stormwater utility, then that, and then you could do that actually.
They could, there's, I think there's been renewed interest in stormwater.
There is.
I was a long time ago.
I'm working on that. I mean, it's really important for
Yeah,
the municipalities to have a way
no,
to,
and it's good that conversation's happening again.
Yeah.
We did it a long time ago.
yeah,
And each municipality is a little different, there was different ideas
Right.
about what it could be, and everyone sort of saw value, but there wasn't like a clear path forward, like, yes.
and that's what we're, honestly, that's what I'm trying to do. I had a bill to have a clear path forward, but just finding what that clear path is challenging, and it's been helpful what I've learned today. But if, but a municipal stormwater utility that included a fair, could actually be the entity that is responsible for that fair's offsite, stormwater, and establishes a rate. And the rate could change over time, like a regular utility changes over time as it matures.
You just have to be clear as to what the intent of that utility is. The
Yeah.
utilities we have is, they're there for operation and maintenance,
Right.
perhaps doing some, sort of a retroactive treatment of existing dischargers. To take on that lift of saying, all right, we're going to, find problems to fix to help it.
Right.
TMBL, those user rates could be quite high.
Oh, they could be,
Not to say it shouldn't be
Right,
done, but
right. But-
it's all.
yeah, but if it's at the local level, the utility operators would be sensitive to the cost. And also the way I'm envisioning it they wouldn't be able to pay for everything, but like, floodplain restoration, it gets very expensive. But if the utility had something to match funds with, a match for other funds, for other grants, like, there's federal grants. So, so I am thinking of things like floodplain restoration, which is a huge expense, but it's something we need to do.
Absolutely.
Yes, sort of run it.
Sure, strikes me as all, an unfunded mandate aside from scattered grants that anybody could pick up. Is that the true statement? The EPA's put up this unfunded mandate on anybody with a 3-acre site.
I'd say it's, the requirement comes from state statute.
Okay, so it's the state.
And the
that put up-
funding, I'm aware of is as I described.
Okay, so it's a fairly unfunded mandate from the state. I just want to be clear what it is. I love the idea of exempting fairs. I also see that will be brought up as an inequity. That we're not, helping a condo association in my neighborhood, help them mitigate their fees. And people are already up to here with taxes and fees, and telling me about affordability all the time. Their town taxes went up 20% last year, their school taxes may go up to 40% this year. I mean, it never ends. And so this condo association is now gonna be paying up to $500,000 over the next so many years for I mean, it's just insanity. And something's gotta be done. People can't afford this. And I'm hearing it at front doors and I'm seeing it in the hallways here. You mentioned a deadline of October for ARPA money if someone would like to get help as in the form of a grant toward a permit fee. Is that?
And permit and the fees they pay their engineering consultant. Yes, they need to apply by October 31, 2024.
And is there someone that, say, the volunteer president of the homeowners association can call for help? I mean, these are everyday people. They have lives, they have kids, they have families, they have parents who are aging, they have kids who are needy, and a host of other things like health problems. And somehow they've got to carve time out of their day to find a way to apply for this grant money by October. I mean, just again, it doesn't sound reasonable. It doesn't sound rational. I don't know. I mean, can they call you? Who can they call for help? And how can I get the word out as somebody who's supposed to be their liaison to state government to help them through this mire? They can't afford to fix it, but I would hate for them to lose out on the grant money to at least getting the permit. And I guess that's the first step of frustration I'm feeling here for all of this.
Understood. The agency, the stormwater program, has reached out to the 3-acre sites over the last couple of years to say, you know, hey,
Okay.
you're a 3-acre site, this is coming, here's the permit deadline. I think they are due to send out additional letter soon. That, you know, making it clear that this funding, the $50,000 is available at least. I can check on that. I was chatter about it this morning. Not sure why it hasn't gone out. There has been a bunch of other, you know, sort of, media relations and so forth. The contact for that particular program is Madeline Russell.
Okay.
Also, if you search on the internet by Vermont 3-acre assistance, you'll land on a website that has that information.
And do we know how hard this form is? Is this the 30-page form that someone again
It's-
is gonna
it's
sweat
actually-
out, or is it something easy on the
It
web?
took a while to develop, but it's actually really simple.
Okay, good.
3-acre sites do work necessarily with a consulting engineer, and so the engineer will be, you know, the one who really helps them through that process, but you can see other folks is available as well.
I can only imagine on top of the $300 homeowners association fee every month that people are paying. When you start telling them they're gonna double or triple, I mean, people are just gonna give up. They're just gonna give up.
Yeah, that's absolutely a risk, and you know, yeah, we hate to see folks, you know, we don't have a control over the ARPA deadline, and so we really want to, really hopeful that as many people take advantage of it as they can.
Jackie,
Yeah, that's it for me.
Jackie, you're frozen, I think. Do you hear us?
Maybe if you turn your camera off, it kind of helps the bandwidth.
Jackie, let us know when you can hear us.
I'll jump in while she's.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I couldn't agree with Senator Renner more. I think, well, I'll let that go because it's a political statement. I don't want to make it right now. We seem to spend a lot of money in this building. I'll just say that. But we can't be the only state that has this issue. And I don't know whether Jared Carpenter can weigh in on this a little bit more, or Patrick wants to, but there's got to be other watersheds that are under the EPA's similar guidelines. What are some of the other ways that the other states are dealing with this? Do they have a similar 3-acre permit rule? Do they have a 5-acre one? Do they have, and I understand we're going to a 1/2 acre soon, if we haven't already. So how do other states fix this?
I don't know about all other states by any stretch. And, you know, an important part of the whole 3-acre approach, at the time, we have the implementation plan, draft plan, we said we could regulate 3-acre sites. At that same time, the Conservation Law Foundation had filed a petition with essentially a lawsuit directing us to require all dischargers, all commercial, institutional, industrial dischargers on Lake Champlain Basin needed to obtain what's called a residual designation authority permit. That petition, that suit was settled through the adoption of 3-acre law in Vermont. In Boston, Charles River is also impaired. There was a similar petition in Charles, so EPA is now regulating all dischargers who contribute to that impairment. So we are doing this at the state level, but in part to, have state control. In the absence of the state stepping up and doing what it needs to do, there is, you can't exempt discharges from the Federal Clean Water Act. So that was the part that what drove the implementation of this program the way that we see it. Jared, how do you about others that you're aware of or?
Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee. I don't specifically know, Senator. It's so a lot of what we're doing in this state is modeled after the Chesapeake Bay. And as far as I know, that is sort of the, that's discharge coming from as far away as Pennsylvania, with multiple states working on discharge of phosphorus going to Chesapeake. And they're doing, I know we've modeled some of our programs after that. 3-acre is probably the most technical part of all of this, and probably the aspect I'm the least familiar with. When Act 64 went through this building in 2016, I was in the building with Act 64, moving it through, and it went through, if I'm remembering correctly, 13 different committees, because everybody had a different aspects piece of it. 3-acre was one of the components of the bar of where the EPA set, and here's how you get up to the bar. If you start, as you had mentioned, if you would start moving years out, somebody else is going to have to make up for that bar. I mean, if you're moving the 3-acre out, does that mean you're tightening down the required agricultural practices? So you're still hitting the mark. Does that mean it can't be done? No. Is it one heck of a can of worms? Yes. I think that this has been a great conversation. I think I've talked to the chair about this and all the bouncing around, even going to, and I think Jackie, you were involved in these conversations back when too. When it went into both agriculture committees, I don't think the fairs ever came up in terms of, in terms of an entity that would be impacted in a different way. It was obviously the impacts on the farmers and discharge and waste lagoons and all that came up. That's not to say that, we always talk about everybody has to be all in, everybody has to try to do their part if we can, but I think there's got to be ways, if it's not SRF, there's other ways to help out with funding. The ARPA money is fabulous, but it has to be encumbered by December 31st of this year, or we got to send it back. But we're not sending it back, we're just spending it somewhere else. So that's a great source, but we've been kicking around different ideas. I've talked to Chair Starr about it as well, of what are some different funding sources that will be more grant oriented and loan oriented. And is it in the Clean Water Fund? Is it the money AAFM gets or something along those lines? I don't know, but I would seem to think that this is a good conversation to have before we start talking about a narrow exemption for just the fairs or something, which would have to be a conversation internally amongst the environmental community as well. I'm certainly open-minded to all different aspects. So, but thank the committee for talking about this here.
It's important.
Jackie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for this discussion. We really appreciate the fact that you're just turning over every rock to help us. I'd like to ask a question, though, I think there were 300 properties, I thought there were more than that are on the list for the 3-acre rule. How many of those have gotten their permits, and what are the possibilities? What will happen if they don't get their permits by the deadline and start moving? I mean, is there a possibility that we could ask the federal government for an extension on that TMDL without having a lawsuit open up? It's just, I understand because I was lobbying for the Farm Bureau at the time this happened, and we understood the ramifications for the farms. The fairs are absolutely an unintended consequence, I think, that nobody thought of, because I was also lobbying for them at the time, and who knew? I mean, I didn't even occur to me. So I'm interested in how this program is working and how many people have actually are going to hit that deadline. And if not, what are the ramifications for them?
Sure. Well, there's at least 700
I thought it was 8, but
Yeah, it's been a little while since I looked, but yeah, between 700-800 3-acre sites. I don't know how many have applied. Yeah, I mentioned they're not in that program anymore. Kevin Burks, the program manager, he might be a good witness if this committee wanted to look into that further. What happens next? I know the agency's efforts are solely focused on, communicating, technical assistance, trying to come up with funding assistance, not, certainly not in enforcement mode yet. In terms of what happens, I think, yeah, I guess I would have to be a conversation with EPA as to whether the implementation plan could be extended. And I can't really speak to the agency's position as to whether that's something that we would want to engage in.
I think without a doubt, as you said, Jackie, turning over every stone, but I think one of the, that I'm thinking of doing, and it kind of comes off of what Senator Collmore had said about no response from the federal delegation. I think that we're gonna craft a letter from this committee and, on your behalf and our frustrations and your frustrations to the federal delegation and get an official response from them to see if they could, just something. We're not gonna stop until we find something. We know there's dire consequences, moving forward with the way it's going right now. Everybody wants to do their part, but, I think that we're at least gonna spend some time as a committee and craft a thoughtful letter to the federal delegation. And see if, what their thoughts are, and if they feel like they could, shed some light on this, supply some money, or come up with some different ideas, different timelines and stuff. We're not gonna stop. That's one thing that we're gonna do. But any other thoughts, any other comments, any other, anything that anybody would like to add that they haven't added, or further the discussion?
Just to
The
say
Fairs
thank you.
Association has a meeting tomorrow night, Senator, and we'll discuss, we could also write a letter to go along with yours. I think that might be helpful to hear directly from the fairs and what they're dealing with and how much it's absolutely going to cost them. So I'll suggest that we talk about that tomorrow night on our agenda, and I'll let you know what happens.
Yeah, maybe we can get together on that, and, certainly you guys are gonna have a little bit more technical information, proper wording and all of that stuff. I mean, we wanna be knowledgeable when we send there. We wanna make sure we hit all the points that are important to you folks. So maybe after that meeting, Jackie, you can get back with us, and then we can put something out there.
I think Tim was waiting.
Tim?
Just wanted to say thank you. Again, repeating what I said, I know you folks are very busy, and I sincerely appreciate the time and effort you put, not just with the meetings here, but I can tell a lot of conversations have happened outside of that. So thank you.
Well, I think it was, to me, I can't remember if Senator Renner or maybe Jackie or somebody had said, all of you, about the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've spent as a state, and it could go away just like that. I mean, you folks start dropping off. And one thing about it, and I've said it before, you guys have heard it, when you guys are gone, nobody's stepping back in. Nobody's coming back. The first year that you folks aren't in operation is the last year that you're in operation, and we understand that. We really, really do. We're pretty big in this building about culture. I don't think that there's a group that represents Vermont culture any more than what the fairs do. You guys have done, you face so many challenges to keep on going and moving, and we're gonna do something. We're not gonna stop. So just if you guys come up with any thoughts as well, Jackie, we know we'll hear back from you. You've been a great advocate for the people you're representing, so we'll wait to hear from you, but we'll put something forward to the federal delegation, see what happens, and anything else, please let us know.
Actually, you know what, let me ask just
Yeah.
one thing. Sorry to bring this up at the end. Would any of you folks be okay, or would you be okay if we talk about your municipalities? Talk about this issue with your municipalities?
Yep. By all means, yeah. That'd be fine. I know.
It would be very helpful if they are agreeable with the.
But I think, and I hear you on that, Senator, but I think it really gets down to, you know, it's not that these folks aren't thankful for, you know, the available monies, it's just the massive amounts of monies
Yeah,
that it's gonna take.
right,
And I mean, even if the municipalities were great and they wanted to work and they wanted to apply, it just gets back to how do we pay back the money? How do we pay it back and what's really honestly, what's the return on investment? You know, I mean, I know that there's other people in the room that are gonna say, well, the return on investment is obvious, it's clean water. Well, you know, I think that we have to really look at what can we afford? I mean, what can we afford at the end of the day? When it's, when you don't have anything left, what have you done? What have you accomplished? And I think that's where we're at right here. It's just, there's so many other things, there's so many other values that you folks bring to Vermont. We have to really look at what are we really doing to you? And, that's where I'm at. So. Anything else? We wanna thank you folks, we wanna thank you for, it sounds like we might have swung and missed a little bit, but, I think, we're gonna get we're gonna keep the conversations going, and, Jackie will hear from you soon.
Yes, you will, sir. Thank you very much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
thanks,
Thank
Thank you
you,
very much.
Bye.
thank you.
Thanks,
very much.
Margaret.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
thanks.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, no, no.
I'm gonna circle back and get on my.
Thank you,
my
yeah.
stormwater utilities.
We're
Yeah,
still
Not
at
yet.
We're like,
Yeah.
what's the rest of our week look like?
Well, I don't think